metal maniacs, thrashers, punks, death metal delinquents, grindcore freaks, old school rockers, new school hardcore kids, and everyone else in between. This is the Solid Steel Syndicate podcast, baby.
Top of the morning to you. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Solid Steel Syndicate podcast. I'm your host, Irish J. Irons. And as always, we're going to talk some metal today. We're sticking around the year 1989. It was a great year. There was a lot of albums and records that came out before this that were solid and really started solidifying the metal scene, the thrash metal scene, the explosion and the growth that it undertook as time went on. But 1989 was a great year because you had some stuff that was already out, and there was some exciting new stuff that was coming out at the same time. So today I'm going to talk about Testament's Practice What You Preach, which of course came out in 1989. Great album. Testament had some other albums that were out before this that I really liked as well. And Testament is one of those bands that's just one of the most consistent, solid bands throughout their history. Everything they put out is great. Some of it's amazing. They're just, every time they get an album, you got to hear it. You got to check it out and you got to get it because you know it's going to be good. And like I said, some of their albums are better than others when you compare them to each other, but they're all really, really, really good albums. My favorite album, which I would consider a great album by Testament, is Practice What You Preach. I think this was when a lot of bands in the Big Four this year and this era started really catching on and started becoming something that was the pinnacle of the explosion, for lack of a better term. But this is where things really started to get more mainstream. You started seeing more videos on MTV, on Headbangers Ball, and more people wearing the metal shirts and things like that. And it just was really, really an exciting time. So Testament's a great band. And like I said, they always put out really good stuff. Super talented musicians. Every single person in that band is a super talented musician. Alex Skolnick is someone that most guitar players look up to and strive to be like. He's right up there with some of the Big Four guitar players, Kerry King and Dave Mustaine and Jeff Hanneman and Scott Ian. Alex Skolnick is right there with those guys, and he puts out some really interesting and different vibes in the songs that Testament do. And I think another thing that makes Testament interesting is the fact that Chuck Billy has a lot of Native American blood in him, and the subject matter is a little different when Testament does it, and some of the things that they discuss and talk about are things that he approaches it from a different way than some of the other guys and some of the other bands that I've discussed so far. So the first song on the album, Practice What You Preach, it has that bass sound that's a little different than most records at this time. That bass sound was a little bouncier, a little more pronounced, and it really excuse me, you can really hear it. A lot of times the bass in this style of music is playing exactly what the guitars are playing, and it kind of gets buried between the guitar and the drums, which is the job of the bass, is to tie the guitar to the drums typically. So sometimes you can't really hear the bass or what it's doing. And on this record, the bass is really pronounced, and it has a weird different sound in a good way. I like it. It just gives this record something that's a little bit different than everything else that was coming out and everything that was already out at that time. So this song is about not being a hypocrite, practicing what you preach. If you're saying something to someone, then you better be doing that too. Don't, if you live in a glass house, don't cast the first stone. It's about being real, being a real person. And also at this time, there was a lot of things with like the televangelists and that kind of thing, where there were some people that their heart was in the right place when they were doing these kind of things. But then there were some people that were just taking advantage of people and taking people's money and were strictly in it just for the money. And they were not practicing what they were preaching. They were living a completely different lifestyle, and they were telling people to give them all of their money. And then they were going about living through the ways that they said that other people shouldn't live. So it's about hypocrisy, and it's about being the person that you say you are, and representing who you are, practicing what you preach. That's what this song is about. And like I said, it's during this time period particularly. I don't know that I see it too much at all anymore. There are still some, actually, now that I think about it, televangelists, but back then it was a really big thing, and there wasn't an internet, and so people didn't really know what was going on. People weren't able to talk to each other and compare notes and say, hey, I sent money to this guy. Whereas now as soon as something happens, everyone finds out about it. Before, things were kind of in a silo, and things were contained to the region or the area that the thing took place. So if a pastor or someone who was taking people's money got busted for fraud, or with a prostitute or something like that, it was pretty easy to keep that quiet back then. Eventually it would probably leak out, but now with social media and things like that, like there's no chance of doing that. So soon as something is newsworthy, or even if people deem it to be something that other people need to know, it's on social media like that, and everybody knows what's going on. So that was a big thing in this time period in the 80s and the late 80s. There were people that were just going bankrupt, just giving all their money to these preachers because that's what they were being told to do. Again, their heart was in the right place. They thought they were doing a good thing. They thought they were helping out a good cause. But then behind the scenes, there were people that were just taking the money and weren't using it for what they said they were using it for. So practice what you preach. That's what this song is about. And excellent song. Probably my favorite song on the album. Really just a good, solid song. This record, I feel like you can sense that Testament was influenced by Metallica. This record has a very Metallica feel. Not that they're copying off of Metallica or trying to sound like Metallica. It just comes off like this could very easily be a Metallica record for me. And I really like it. It really fit in with the time period. And it also stood out at the same time. And Chuck Billy, just a badass dude. You see him in the videos and you're just like, whoa, like, check this dude out. And so really, really great album. The next song on this album is called Perilous Nation. This one is, I think it's just about, not being blinded by what's going, not being lied to, not falling victim to, he says, free of anger, free of pain, free of hatred that we obtain. Sorry, I forgot the lyrics. And, it's about unity. I think it's about not falling victim to things that are trying to separate us, things that are trying to pull us apart and cause us to fight, but to be free of anger, free of pain, and free of hatred. And that's what this song is about. It says perilous nation, meaning that the nation won't be able to survive if we keep going the way that we're going, and that there needs to be some unity, and people need to get together and move forward as a country, and then influence the world and move forward as a better, more positive world. The next song on this record is called Envy Life. Like I said, Chuck Billy has Native American blood, and so he's a spiritual guy, and you can sense that in his lyrics and some of the songs and even some of the titles. But this song is about it's about magic, or I believe black magic, or just any kind of magic that you don't really know about, that you're just kind of dabbling in, for lack of a better word. And it's about the spiritual world and about the consequences of your actions. And Envy Life is talking about the evil spirits, or the bad spirits that they want to be alive, and that you might be tapping into them when you think you're tapping into something else. And you might have the best intentions, but if you're not very, very strong in this, in whatever you're practicing, if you don't know about it and you're not doing it well, a lot of bad things can happen. And particularly with this type of thing, really bad things can happen. So it's it's about not dabbling in things. And the spiritual world is something that can be dangerous, and there is consequences for your actions. I know Dave Mustaine has a song that he won't play anymore because it was a spell. And he did say that he left part of the spell out so that people wouldn't be able to do it. But he was recently talking about it, and I've heard him talk about it before. He was recently talking about it, and he said that he actually he called it a hex. He put a hex on someone, and the place that he put the hex on the person was on their leg, and then the person ended up getting in a car accident, getting their leg mangled. So, and then it kind of freaked him out, and he realized, like, whoa, like, this stuff is real. I got to be careful with what I'm dealing with. And I think that's what Chuck Billy is talking about here. Envy Life is about the spiritual world, and they're spirits, so they don't play by the same rules, and they don't have the same regulations or limitations that the human world has. So if you're not very strong, you it's just something that you shouldn't mess with. The next song is "The Time Is Coming," and I think this is about just feeling powerless, powerless to the government, powerless to society, just the world in general. Where he says, "I think my world has gone to hell." It's just, if you look around, you can see all the negativity, especially if you watch the news, even social media. There's just a lot of negative stuff, and this was before social media, so he's probably talking more about the news. And even in his personal life, the things that are going on around him, he mentions the government and being taxed, and so I feel like he feels like he's powerless. But the time is coming. Like, there's going to be a time where I'm going to fight back. Or the time is coming could also be interpreted as the time is coming where things are going to get worse. Like, he feels like this is leading up to something that's going to be, while things are really bad now, this is leading up to something that's going to be really, really bad. So it could be interpreted either way. I interpreted it as the time is coming. Time's coming where I'm going to fight back. You're going to push me too far, and then I'm going to have to do something back, because he does feel powerless, and he's kind of speaking to other people that might feel the same way. And the next song on "Practice What You Preach" is "Blessed in Contempt." It's got a real heavy beginning, and then it goes into the fast part. And to me, I think this song is about a person, maybe not necessarily Chuck, I'm not sure, but a person who was abused, because he talks about his father clenching up his fist. And so I feel like it's about abuse. This was something that was important in that era, and is today. It was something that was prevalent, and something that started getting a light shined on it. I think in the 80s, it started becoming not something, it was never accepted, I don't think, but not something that people just kind of turned a blind eye to, or people said, well, this doesn't affect me, so I'm not going to worry about it. It was something where it needed to be addressed, it needed to be dealt with, and it's everyone's problem. And if a child or a woman is being abused, then it's something that it's all of our places to make sure that doesn't happen anymore. So I feel like "Blessed in Contempt," because he does mention his father clenching up his fist, and about anger. And I also feel like it's about Chuck saying that he wouldn't want someone to fall into that same path. Again, I've talked about this on other songs, but on other albums, but it was a very, very important issue, and something where when people are listening to this music, especially kids, between like 10 to 17, and for this song, I'm going to talk particularly about males. It's something where it's important to think about ahead of time before you get in that situation, before you get in a place where you just feel like you can't control your emotions. This gives you something to think about, and think about it from both parties' perspectives. And maybe it's something you realize, okay, anger is something I need to work on, and I never want to abuse anyone. So this is definitely something that I need to get in hand, and something I need to take care of. So maybe this helped people out, and might have even, along with shedding a light on the topic, it might have also stopped someone else from doing it in the future that listened to this song in their past. So I'm happy that, and that's the other thing, and I've said this about pretty much every album I've discussed so far, is that these guys are crazy, wild headbangers with long hair and loud guitars and loud drums, and they're screaming into microphones. But if someone, because this music was pretty dismissed at first by the mainstream, by people who just didn't get it, by people who just thought it was just noise and didn't look a little deeper. If you look a little deeper at these albums, during this time period, there's a lot of heavy subject matter in it. There's a lot of things, a lot of topics that aren't fun. This music is fun, but it's also heavy, and it's hard, and it deals with things that are not fun. And so this was a subject matter. You'll find this in a lot of bands, songs talking about abuse. I know DRI talked about it. I know Exodus talked about it. Metallica, Megadeth, they all talked about it. And so it was something that all these guys are different. They're in different bands. They all look crazy, but they all have compassion. They all have a sense of what's important and what, what needs to be looked at. So I'm glad that that Chuck went there as well. So again, we talked about socially conscious lyrics, just in going with what I just said. These guys had a message. Some of the lyrics and some of the songs are scary, and some of them are silly, and some of them are funny, and some lyrics are just plain stupid. But a lot of stuff that these guys talk about is important issues, and especially things that were important to the kids at that time and going forward. Then speaking of that, the next song is called Greenhouse Effect, and it's about losing the rainforest, which was really going down at a really rapid rate. Back then, there was a clock, and you would see how many trees. It would tick down how many trees were being eradicated, how many trees were being cut down. They would do like a slash and burn, where they would burn part of the forest to make room for different things, whether it was housing or whether it was for livestock to feed, so they could put pastures there. But the rainforests were going away, and it was creating something called the greenhouse effect, which is where the earth just keeps getting hotter and hotter because the sun is reflected, and the light is reflected from the sun back to the earth, from the earth back to the sun. And it creates, and then everything is trapped inside of these gases, which were emitted from large corporations, from pollution, and just naturally too. Then the heat was trapped inside of these gases, and it's something that was called the greenhouse effect. And he talks about environmental holocaust, and it's talking about the large corporations that are doing the pollution. There's only so much water, there's only so much air, there's only so much that you can pollute before these things start coming back to you. And greenhouse effect was a real thing. It was a real term, but it's also a metaphor for what's really going on. It's things are being trapped inside, and they're coming back to you. And it's things that are of a cyclical nature, which one thing feeds off the other thing feeds off the other. And if you don't do something about it, it just continues, and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse until there is no more clean water, until there is no more clean air, until there are no more trees. So this is another thing that was very, very, very important to Chuck and the Testament. So and again, all these bands, you'll see these themes through pretty much every album that I discuss. You'll see these themes running through there. That's not why I chose these albums. I didn't necessarily choose these albums because their lyrics were socially conscious, or they were dealing with subjects that I felt were important. I chose these albums because they rock, because they're amazing. But then when you look a little deeper into them, you do discover that there's heart here. It's not just let's play as fast as we can, let's scream as loud as we can. There's heart, there's soul, there's talent. There's so much talent and so much technique. And again, these guys, Testament, are the forefront of musicians. They're amazing, amazing musicians, and from what I've heard, really cool guys as well. So the next song on this album is called "Sins of Omission." This is an anti-suicide song. He says, "False sense of pride. There's no reason for suicide." This is again another topic that was broached by almost every band from this era that you can think of. A lot of them, anyways. Suicide was another thing that I remember being in class, and being pulled out of class, and we'd go down to the auditorium for a special. We'd have an assembly. They would call them assemblies, and they would have like a special guest speaker. And there was a guy that was there that tried to kill himself, and he shot himself, and he shot himself in the head. And when he shot himself in the head, he didn't die, but it made him blind, and it did some other things to him. And I know that I've gone through some hard times in my past. I've gone through a lot of them. I've had friends that went through hard times. I've had friends, unfortunately, that have killed themselves directly. I've had friends that have killed themselves slowly over time because they just didn't care anymore, and they got into some really heavy drugs, and they just didn't stop. And I watched people wither and disappear and wither away and turn into skeletons still walking around, and then a couple of days later heard they were dead, and unfortunately was not surprised. So but that all leads back to, what's the cause? Where's this coming from? Because people who are fulfilled and who are totally mentally stable, I don't think try a drug where you know that this could possibly kill me right now. If I do this right now, I could get really high and have fun, or I could get really sick and shit my pants, or I could just die. Like there has to be something in a person's mind going on at that point that they're just they don't value their own life, and that's what this song "Sins of Omission" is about. Is about, you know, it all comes back to the same thing, whether the person kills themselves directly with a gun or a knife or pills, or they do it slowly. It was a topic that had to be addressed because teen suicide, and I don't know the numbers anymore. I don't know if they've gone up or gone down. I know there's more people in the world now, so the number has probably gone up. I'd be curious to know what the percentages are, but I'm not sure. But definitely a topic where, especially if you're like me and you've known people who have killed themselves, known people that needed help, it was definitely a very, very important topic, and something that that I was glad that Testament discussed. And this album is really has a lot of socially conscious lyrics. The more I think about it, again, that's not why I chose it. I chose it because it kicks ass, and I love the songs. And the songs, I remember my friend. He started driving before I did, and he had a tape player in his car. And I remember us listening to this tape all the time, just flipping it over. And then walking around the city, he had a boom box, which is just a big radio, but it had a tape player on it. And I remember we listened to this tape all the time, this and DRI and Cryptic Slaughter. And we just, you know, but this one in particular, there's definitely some memories, some nights driving around, just me and him driving around, and just talking and laughing and just listening to metal. So you know, this album is near and dear to my heart for a couple reasons, but not to mention how killer it is, how kick ass it is. It's a great album. The next song after "Sins of Omission" is "The Ballad," and I think this song's just about life and just about being free. Again, Chuck Billy has that Native American blood, and that's something that's important to the Native American people is being free and freedom. And whenever I think of Native American people, I always picture an eagle, and I just feel like Chuck was just, you know, it's a ballad. It's slower in the beginning, and I like ballads. When I was younger, I didn't like ballads. I was just thrash or die kind of guy. But as I got a little older and looked back, the sentimentality was there, but also just recognizing the musicality and the talent and the skill it took to play some of these ballads. And yeah, I love vocals, and you can really hear singers' vocals. They can really show off in ballads and slower songs. So this song, and Testament didn't try to hide it, because it was kind of a thing where because you had glam rock and hair rock and hair metal and that stuff at the time, like bands, especially these type of bands, didn't want to be associated with those types of bands because, hey, that's not what we are. We're not wearing lipstick and lace, and we're not dressing up and teasing our hair way out or anything like that. We're just coming on the stage, just a t-shirt, jeans, and probably high top white sneakers, probably Nikes, maybe Reeboks. So they didn't want to be associated with the glam metal. So they had to draw some lines when it came to some things that they did, some things that they said, and some of their performances and some of the songs that they chose to do. Testament didn't try and hide it. Testament was like, this is a ballad. We're playing a ballad. Metallica did a ballad years before this called Fade to Black, and they always would deny that it was a ballad, but it kind of is a ballad. And so Testament was like, you know what? This song's a ballad. We're just going to call it a ballad, which I love. They're like, we're just being honest. This song is a ballad. It's slow. It's got a lot of feel to it. It's got a lot of emotion with it. You can sing along. And that part where he's like, yeah, that's so, I picture that eagle flying right there at that part. So, yeah. And then it does pick up, it does pick up towards the ending, and it gets a little heavier, more metal, more thrashy. So, the ballad is a great song. It fits on this album perfectly. And, again, the flow of an album is something that's very important, especially back then when you bought an album, you listened to the whole album, you listened to the whole record, you listened to the whole tape, because it wasn't easy to skip around. Now you have Spotify, you have Amazon, all these streaming services where you can just pick and choose songs. So albums don't have to be as strong as they used to have to be. So this album flows really, really well. Again, just the flow of this album speaks to the consistency of Testament's flow through their history. All of their albums flow, and all of their albums flow into the next album, and it makes sense. They didn't do anything. They're an original band, but they didn't do anything like crazy where they just took a wild left turn, like, hey, we're going to try something super different. And I love that. They were consistent, and bands, I think, are afraid to be consistent because they're afraid their fans are going to be like, well, all your songs sound the same. But if you love a band and all their songs sound the same, then that means you should love all their songs, even though they might sound slightly the same. Like if you take the Misfits or the Ramones, a lot of their songs sound pretty much the same, but you still love them all, and they're still slightly different. So with Testament, with this album, they did a really good job. Well, in their careers, they've done a really good job at maintaining their consistency. The next song on the album is Nightmare Coming Back to You. And I think this I think this song is just about karma. It goes kind of back to practice what you preach, how things have a cycle, and karma is a big thing. And I think karma is a big thing probably with the way Chuck feels about life, with the way he views life. I get that feeling. I'm not speaking for him, but I'm pretty sure he gets the what you put out is what you get back. I'm pretty sure he gets that pretty wholeheartedly, and probably more so than most people do. And so, and there's a Native American saying too, that only take what you need and give back what you take. Again, it's the give. Life is a give and take. There's give and takes to life. And if we all did that, if we all took what we needed, not things that are crazy that no one needs, and we gave back, I think the world would be a perfect place. So, but Nightmare Coming Back to You, I think, is about, obviously, it's about negative karma. About if you do something stupid, or you do something mean or mean-spirited, or you're a bully, at some point, that's going to come back to you. You can only be a bully for so long. I grew up in a time where bullying wasn't, what's the word? No one tried to stop bullying. Well, I had friends that beat bullies up, but it wasn't as big of an issue as it is now, like with the cyberbullying, and it's almost gotten to a point where it might be there might be a little bit too much interference, maybe. But back then, like, I got bullied, I got tripped by kids that were older than me, and like they kind of snicker as I walk by and point at me, but it made me tougher. It made me realize, like, all right, there's assholes in the world, so I don't want to be like that. So it's a give and take, and there's karma, and what you put out is what you're going to get back. Undoubtedly, it might take some time, but I've seen bullies, and I've seen there's a guy I knew that we went to a football game, and he punched this dude in the face. He just blasted this dude in the face, and really there was not a reason for it. And then we went outside, and we went out into the parking lot, and a dude that didn't even know that other guy came up and just punched this other guy in the face, and then punched him again. And he's like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, you punched that guy in the face for no reason, so now I'm punching you in the face for no reason. So I've got a million stories like that I could tell you about, how I've seen how negative karma can be. I've experienced it, and it's made me a better person. It's made me a stronger person. I think it's made me more easily approachable than I used to be. And, we're all humans. And so if you can help someone out, why wouldn't you want to help someone out? Why would you want to hurt someone or leave someone that needs help? If you can help them, help them. And I don't understand why you wouldn't want to. I don't understand bullies. Like, I don't, it does, to me, that doesn't make you strong. If you pick on people that are weaker than you, and you always do that, that doesn't prove anything. To me, that's a source of integrity, is being around people that maybe are weaker than you, or and just still being friends with them, and just treating them like you treat everyone, just treating everyone the same. Again, Nightmare Coming Back to You. If you put something negative or nightmarish out there, it's gonna come back to you. Trust me, trust Chuck Billy for sure. So another excellent song on the album. This is a nightmare. It's just this whole album is just there's no weak points on this album. There's no songs where I'm like, I'll just probably skip that song. Well, actually, except for the last one. Confusion Fusion. I feel like they just needed one more song for the album. It's an instrumental, and it's good. It's got a cool little like a trippy lead in there that kind of keeps cutting through, and it keeps coming back to that, and it's cool, and it's well written. It's a good song. I just feel like maybe they needed one more song for the album, and they had been working on this song, and they didn't even put lyrics to it yet. But they're like, all right, let's just throw this on the album. Again, it's a decent song. For me, you could have stopped with Nightmare Coming Back to You, number 9. You could have had 9 tracks. I think 10 tracks on an album, at least 10, was kind of the norm back then. You had, I think most albums had at least 10, usually between 10 to 13 songs was, for both sides of the tape, both sides of the record. I think that's what bands usually strove for. And I do think there's a lot of filler songs where if a band was just putting out, if they were okay with putting out like a 7 to 9 song album, there's a lot of songs that would have been left off. And sometimes you can tell that. Again, I'm not bashing this song. This is probably the weakest song on the album though. And it's a song I could do without, but I do like it. So it does fit with the album. And it's actually it's a good way to end the album, just going out with the instrumental and just kind of stay stuck in your head with that lead that keeps coming back through there. So, again, another excellent album, one of my favorites of all time. If you haven't listened to this in a while, go back and listen to it because it's awesome. If you've never heard it, definitely check it out. I know Testament's been around for decades, so they have a ton of albums. So I realize that there's people that are going to get into some of the bands that I like later on in that band's timeline. I would always encourage people to, if you listen to a band, this is what I always did, because a lot of these bands, I'm not going to act like I'm some expert in every record or tape that came out. I was the first one to have it the day it came out. A lot of bands, I didn't discover those bands until their second or third album because that's when they broke through. So what I would do when I would discover a band, I would go back through their catalog and start from the beginning. So if there's any bands that you're listening to that you're like, man, this is awesome, I started listening to this back in 2005, then go back to 1985 or go back to 1989. And check out what they were doing back then and what led them up to the point where they are now. Dave Mustaine says it a lot, and I know I quote Dave Mustaine a lot. I love Dave Mustaine, and Joey from Anthrax. I love Joey too. So you might hear me quote either one of these guys, but Dave Mustaine always says of a band's first record, you had your whole life to write that record. So you've probably been writing that record for 20 years. If that's your first record and you're like 20 years old in a band, you probably have been writing that for some time. Then you got in a band, you got together, and you guys wrote it, and then you moved on. So Dave says that you have your whole life to write your first record. It's the second record that's the hardest. So consider some of these bands that have 15 to 20 albums that have been around for decades. It's amazing, and it's a testament to Testament and to all the other bands in the Big Four that are still doing their thing, that are still kicking ass. So definitely, if you're listening to me, you're probably into metal. You probably already know everything I'm telling you. But maybe not. Maybe you were like, oh yeah, Testament. Like I've been listening to a lot of their newer stuff, but let me check out this Practice What You Preach album. You won't be disappointed. It's a really good album. So I just want to thank you all for listening to me. I'm one step closer to having merchandise, I promise. And I'll give you some more details on that in the weeks to come. Again, as always, I'm Irish J Irons. This is the Solid Steel Syndicate podcast. Thanks for watching.